you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, subscribe now for new stories every day. My name is Jack, and I'm 34 years old. I live in one of the suburbs of Seattle, Washington. Together with my wife, Sarah, we own a small two-story house with a cozy backyard, a place we used to love hosting barbecue parties. We've been together for 12 years in total. We dated for 5 of those years, then got married, and have now been husband and wife for 7 years. We have a 4-year-old son named Owen, a wonderful boy who loves playing with toy cars and chasing a ball around the yard. Until recently, I was convinced that my family was my fortress. I fully trusted Sarah, and it never crossed my mind that she could betray me. We first met at a mutual friend's party. She was a college student studying economics while I was working part-time at an IT company and finishing my own college degree. From the first moment, she impressed me with her simplicity and sincerity. We quickly grew closer, moved in together after a couple of months, and then 5 years later, we got married. Everything seemed to go smoothly. We bought a house, threw lively parties for our friends, and often enjoyed the company of my best friend, Mike, someone I've known since childhood. Mike is charismatic, sociable, and always ready with a joke or a funny story. He works in sales at a large firm, easily makes new acquaintances, and is always the life of the party. In many ways, he was like a brother to me, someone who was there from our high school baseball days onward. He became Uncle Mike to our son, frequently bringing him little toys and treats. Never would I have imagined that he would end up becoming the reason my family life shattered. But let's go step by step. It all began around 2 years ago. We hosted our usual summer barbecue in the backyard. It was a warm, sunny day with music playing, and we invited about 10 friends over, including Mike. Sarah took care of most of the hosting duties, preparing snacks, decorating the table, and generally making sure everyone had fun. At first, everything went great. We were grilling steaks, drinking beer, chatting, and laughing. At some point, I got a phone call from my parents. My dad had a sudden spike in blood pressure, and my mom asked if I could drive over to help them with a few things. My parents live about an hour away, so I told Sarah I would leave for a couple of hours. She said that was fine. There were plenty of guests around, and she wouldn't be alone. "I'll be back soon," I reassured her. "Don't worry, sweetheart, we'll be fine without you," Sarah replied, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek and a smile. All the guests stayed in our backyard. Some kept grilling, others were playing cornhole, and some were just sitting around chatting at the table. Mike was still there, hanging out. I jumped in the car and drove off, having no idea that this decision would soon prove disastrous. I got back only late in the evening. The barbecue was winding down. Some guests had already left, and others were about to. Sarah looked tired, but otherwise normal. Mike was gone. Someone said he'd left about an hour before I arrived. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Everyone was simply wrapping up a long day of partying. I helped Sarah clean up, put away the leftover food, and wash the grill. That night, we went to bed as though everything was perfectly normal. The incident that changed my life didn't come to light until 2 years later. For all that time, I remained in complete ignorance. Life went on, our usual gatherings with friends, raising our son, making plans together. Mike stayed a close friend, and I never suspected a thing. He could have confessed right away, but perhaps he was afraid or ashamed. Then one summer afternoon, Mike suggested we go camping overnight, a simple outdoor trip near a mountain lake, just him and me. We brought a tent, fishing poles, and planned to cook our catch over a campfire if we were lucky enough to catch something. That evening, after setting up camp, we lit a fire. Sitting there, reminiscing like we used to in our early 20s, we each had a beer in hand, content in each other's company. "Jack," Mike started hesitantly, "there's something I've wanted to tell you for a long time, but never had the courage." "Come on, Mike, we're best friends. Just say it. What's going on?" I smiled, sipping my beer. "Remember that barbecue at your place about 2 years ago in the summer?" "Sure. We've had quite a few barbecues, but I do recall one that year where it was really hot, and I had to leave to see my parents." "Yes, that one." He averted his gaze and squeezed his beer can so hard it nearly crushed. I'd feel terrible saying this, but that day, I slept with Sarah. At first, I just couldn't comprehend his words. I asked him to repeat it, thinking he was either joking or too drunk to know what he was saying. But then he gave me detailed descriptions, how everyone had drunk too much, how the group had splintered off, with some people passing out, others leaving, and how Sarah was possibly upset or drunk enough not to know what she was doing. According to him, it all happened quickly, spontaneously. They slipped into one of the rooms and had sex. I know it sounds awful. There's no excuse for me. Mike said, looking tormented. I tried to muster the courage to tell you before, but I just couldn't. Are you out of your mind? I shouted, a wave of nausea hitting me. How could you do that? I trusted you like a brother. He said nothing, just bowed his head. I jumped up, fury raging through me, and punched him in the jaw. Mike dropped his beer and staggered back, then wiped the blood from his split lip, head bent in acceptance. I deserve that, he said quietly. We both fell silent. Rage boiled inside me. He was consumed by shame. Strangely, after some time, I continued drinking with him, numb and unsure how else to react. All I felt was a primal urge to hit him again and scream, "Why did you both do this to me?" But I held back. He had confessed. Now I had to decide what I was going to do with the truth. Returning home, I spent several days in a trance. Sarah noticed how withdrawn I'd become. She asked, "Jack, what's wrong? You're so distant." "I'm just tired," I mutter. I needed time to process. Part of me wondered if Sarah would admit it on her own, if she could sense that I knew something. But she remained silent. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. It was late in the evening, and our son Owen was already asleep. "Sarah, we have to talk seriously." "What's happened?" she asked, her eyes filling with concern. "Tell me what went on during that party 2 years ago when I went to my parents' place." My voice was calm, but inside I was trembling. I, I don't remember what you mean." Sarah lowered her gaze. "We drank a lot that day." "Stop. I already know. Mike told me." She jolted as if she'd been shocked by electricity. For a few moments, she said nothing, seemingly unable to speak. Then she burst into tears and started pleading for forgiveness, explaining she was so drunk she didn't know what she was doing, that it happened only once and never repeated. "Jack, I beg you, understand I was in terrible shape," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I don't even remember half that evening." "Yet you remember enough," I said, fighting the urge to scream. "You hid this from me for 2 whole years." "I was afraid of losing you," Sarah whispered, "afraid that you'd never forgive me." "So you chose to lie." I clenched my fists. "You betrayed me, and then you lived alongside me every day, pretending nothing had happened." She dropped to her knees, sobbing, grabbing my hands. I looked down at her, feeling my life crumbling. The person I trusted most had done something like this, and my best friend, the man I consider a brother to. I watched Sarah's tears, and I felt fury and anguish all at once. We'd spent 12 years together. We had a child. Could one act really destroy everything we built? The next morning, I got up early as usual for work. Sarah came out of the bedroom with puffy eyes. She wanted to say something, but she stayed silent, maybe afraid that any word might provoke me more. I realized our relationship had hit a breaking point, and yet there was one crucial factor. Our son. He was only 4 years old, innocent, and still in love with both parents. If we divorced, he'd be torn between us, forced to deal with a broken family. Sure, people say a child will eventually understand that it's better for his parents to separate than to live in a lie. But right now, looking into his little eyes, I couldn't make that call. I visited a family attorney, someone who had helped us with paperwork for our house, and discussed the possible divorce, custody, and what that might look like. He explained that I'd likely end up with shared custody, but we'd have to split property and handle numerous legal issues. When I left his office, I felt even more depressed. I wasn't ready to go down that road, at least not yet. That evening, Sarah and I spoke again. She begged me for another chance, saying she was willing to do anything, anything at all, to keep our family together. She promised to see a counselor, to stop going to any parties with friends if that's what it took for me to trust her again. I stared into her tear-filled eyes and wondered if I still loved this woman, or if I was just so accustomed to her presence that I couldn't tear myself away. Either way, I decided not to divorce her right now. We'd try to move forward, though I was definitely harboring pain and resentment deep inside. A few weeks have passed since then. I took a few days off work to get my head straight. Sarah and I rarely talk about the incident, though she tries to discuss how we might rebuild trust. The truth is, I still feel a wave of disgust when I see her, envisioning her and Mike in our own home. But I'm staying for our son. He knows nothing of what happened. To him, we remain mom and dad. Mike tried calling and texting me a few times, offering to apologize repeatedly or meet in person to Talk it out. I deleted his number and blocked him. Our friendship is dead and gone. Sarah also says she wants no contact with him because, in her words, it reminds her of the worst mistake of my life. Yet I can't shake the fact that I'm choosing to live under the same roof as someone who betrayed me. Yes, she regrets it and swears she loves me, but trust shattered that badly isn't easy to rebuild. I've grown quiet and withdrawn, and I often lie awake at night thinking about how long I can keep living this way. Maybe a year, maybe a month, or maybe forever. I don't know. Jack, let's see a marriage counselor, Sarah suggested one evening. Maybe it'll help. I shrug. We'll see, I need time to figure out if I'm even willing to try that. She sighed but didn't push. She likely realizes that any pressure could drive me further away. I won't lie. Sometimes I catch myself thinking that there's no future for Sarah and me. But for now, I keep the door slightly open because of our child, or maybe because there are still leftover fragments of love in me. Memories flood my mind, our early years traveling along the California coast, stopping in tiny motels, strolling hand in hand on the beach, her encouraging me through job changes and crises, her excitement when the pregnancy test showed 2 lines when she realized we were having Owen. Back then, we felt like a teen who could handle any challenges. Now everything is upside down. Can we recapture a tiny piece of that old harmony when we can't erase the past? I sometimes ask myself, what if time dulls the pain? Or what if we hold on for our son and one day the love resurfaces? And I also wonder if I'm just deceiving myself. Time will tell. One night, when I was tossing and turning, unable to sleep, Sarah placed her hand gently on my shoulder and quietly asked, "You'll never truly forgive me, will you?" I was silent for a moment or two, then replied, "I don't know, maybe someday, but right now it's really hard." She sniffled softly. "I'd give anything to rewind time." "Yeah, so would I said bitterly. "But time doesn't rewind, so we have to live with what we've got." She tried to move closer to hug me, but I pushed her away. I couldn't force myself to let her hold me, not when I kept seeing images of her and Mike in our house. Knowing my own nature, these images will probably haunt me for a long time. For now, I haven't decided whether I'll eventually file for divorce. Our son is only 4. I don't want him to grow up in a broken home, missing one of his parents' constant presence, but living day to day pretending everything is fine is also a huge burden. One thing is certain right now, I'm staying with her in the same house even if my heart feels torn apart. Maybe that's my weakness, or maybe it's a chance for us to save our marriage. I don't know. At work, I bury myself in projects to keep my mind off it. On lunch breaks, I sometimes sit alone in the car, reliving all those what ifs. What if I hadn't left for my parents that day? What if she hadn't drunk so much? What if Mike had the sense to refuse? But it's all in the past now, beyond my control, and my life is split into before and after. Some friends who don't know the situation still invite us to parties. We decline, citing busyness or our son's cold or anything else. Sarah doesn't want to see anyone, and I can't blame her. The very idea of social gatherings brings back that night in my head. One thing that helps a bit, I've been talking to a psychologist online anonymously. Sometimes the advice is useful, like practicing peaceful coexistence if I intend to stay for a while, setting boundaries, giving each other space, and not forcing a quick fix. I try to follow it, but every evening seeing Sarah, I remember her betrayal and can barely contain my anger. Maybe over time I'll find a way to forgive or find the courage to leave. Meanwhile, this is my reality. So here we are. My wife slept with my best friend, and I learned about it only a few weeks ago, even though it happened 2 years prior. I haven't left her mainly because of our son, partly because of our shared memories, and partly out of a faint hope that we might still rebuild what we once had. I've already punched Mike and told him everything I think. I've cut him out of my life completely. But you can't run from your own thoughts. The pain remains like a splinter under my skin. Sometimes I wonder if this is a lesson. Maybe I trusted people too much, ignoring subtle warning signs. I don't know. All I can do is wait to see if time numbs the wound. My priority now is my son. He's the center of my universe, and for his sake, I'm willing to try saving this marriage, assuming that's even possible. But what my final choice will be, I can't say. Not even to myself. That's the story as it stands here in America, in our once cozy home that now feels colder and emptier than ever. If there's any moral here, it might be this: even the most seemingly perfect relationship can hide a flaw you'd never suspected. And when fate decides, that flaw can burst into the open and destroy everything you've built over the years.